The Zirkai warriors dragged Commander Ronan Dax through the grand halls of the Imperial Palace, their sharp claws gripping his arms like iron shackles. He was bruised, bloodied, and unarmed, but his posture remained straight. His piercing green eyes flickered with defiance as he stared ahead, refusing to look beaten. The towering palace of Velzir was nothing like the cold metal of Earth's space stations. The walls shimmered with dark violet stone, pulsing with faint energy. Alien symbols lined the floors, glowing with an eerie crimson light. Ronan had no idea what they meant, but he was sure of one thing. This was the throne room of a ruler who had never known defeat. At the end of the long chamber sat Empress Veil Shera, her form draped in obsidian armor decorated with gold. Her long, midnight blue hair cascaded behind her, framing a face that was both regal and dangerous. Her golden eyes narrowed in amusement as she leaned forward, watching her prisoner with interest. The guards forced Ronan to his knees, but he didn't lower his head. The throne room was silent for a long moment. Then, the Empress finally spoke. "You do not kneel properly, human." Her voice was smooth, yet laced with authority that demanded obedience. Ronan met her gaze without hesitation. "I don't kneel for tyrants." A hushed gasp rippled through the assembled warriors. The Zirkai were a species built on dominance. Submission was expected from the weak. But this human, even when outnumbered and beaten, refused to show fear. Valshera's lips curled into a smirk. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Maybe both," Ronan said, rolling his shoulders despite the bruises. "What happens now? Are we going to talk, or do you plan to execute me for sport?" The Empress studied him, intrigued. "Your kind is new to our empire. Most species who stand before me beg for their lives. You do not. Why?" Ronan let out a breath, shaking his head. "Because I've seen worse than you, lady." The amusement in her golden eyes flickered into something more calculating. "Interesting." She stood, descending the steps of her throne with predatory grace. The room seemed to darken as she approached. Her gaze locked onto Ronan's. She stopped just before him. "I do not believe in wasting potential. You will not die here, human. Instead, you will entertain me." Ronan frowned. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Valshera's smirk widened. "The trial of Kavar," she declared. "A test of combat and endurance. No weapons, no mercy. Survive, and perhaps I will find a use for you." The Zirkai warriors cheered. They knew the trial well. It was a blood sport, designed to break even the strongest beings. Ronan cracked his neck, looking up at the Empress. "Fine," he said. "Let's see if your arena is as scary as you think it is." Valshera raised a brow. Why was this human not afraid? She would soon find out. Ronan Dax stood in the center of the Kavar arena, his muscles tense, his mind sharp. The arena was an enormous circular pit made of dark stone, its walls lined with jagged spikes. Massive Zirkai warriors filled the stands above, their voices booming in excitement. The air was thick with the scent of blood and dust, and the ground beneath him was marked with the scars of past battles. Across from him, the gate rumbled open, releasing his first opponent. The creature that stepped out was a Zirkai warbeast, a monstrous fusion of reptile and insect, its four crimson eyes locking onto Ronan with deadly intent. Its carapace gleamed like obsidian, and its clawed limbs twitched with anticipation. Ronan exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Of course, it's a damn monster. Above him, Empress Veil Shera watched from her throne, perched high above the arena. Her golden eyes studied Ronan with amusement. She had expected him to tremble, to hesitate, to show the first signs of fear. Instead, he smirked. She leaned forward slightly. "Let us see what makes this human so fearless." The warbeast lunged. Ronan dodged to the side just in time, rolling across the rough stone floor as massive claws splashed through the air where he had stood. He moved quickly, faster than the creature expected. The beast growled, its tail whipping toward him like a steel whip. This time, he couldn't dodge. The tail slammed into his side, sending him flying into the dirt. Pain shot through his ribs, but he pushed himself up instantly. The crowd roared in approval. Ronan smirked through the pain. They expected him to stay down. "All right. Ugly," he muttered. Round 2. The beast charged again. But this time, Ronan didn't run. He rushed forward, sliding underneath the creature's massive body. As he passed, he grabbed a loose plate of its carapace and yanked hard. The beast shrieked in pain as a chunk of armor tore free, exposing raw flesh beneath. The Empress raised an eyebrow. He was analyzing the beast, finding its weaknesses. Ronan wasn't done. Before the war beast could recover, he leaped onto its back, gripping the exposed area. The creature bucked wildly, trying to throw him off. But Ronan held on, wrapping his arm around its thick neck. He used his other hand to slam the jagged carapace plate into the exposed flesh, driving it deep. The beast let out a final, horrible screech before collapsing. Silence filled the arena. Then the crowd erupted in cheers. Ronan stood, breathing heavily, his face smeared with dust and sweat. He looked up at Veil Shera. "That the best you got?" The Empress tilted her head, intrigued. She had expected him to survive, perhaps, but not to win. Not like this. She slowly rose to her feet. Impressive. Her voice rang across the arena. "But the trial of Kyovar is not over." Ronan wiped blood from his brow and sighed. "Yeah, I figured." The second gate began to open. He smiled. This was going to be fun. Ronan Dax stood in the middle of the arena, breathing heavily but steady. His body ached from the brutal fight, but his mind was still sharp. The crowd had gone wild after he took down the war beast, but he wasn't done yet. He knew that the Empress, Veil Shera, had something bigger planned. She wouldn't just let him walk away after one fight. The second gate slowly rumbled open, and a new challenge stepped into the arena. This time, it wasn't a creature or a monster. It was a Zurkai warrior, tall and armored in dark plates that shimmered under the harsh light. He moved like a predator, his movements precise, calculated. His dark red eyes locked onto Ronan, filled with disdain. Ronan cracked his neck and straightened. This was the fight that mattered. Above him, Veil Shera watched with unblinking interest. She had seen many warriors, but none had faced her warriors and lived to tell the tale. Ronan's calm in the face of danger was something new, something she hadn't expected from a Terran. Most humans would have cowered, even begged for mercy. But this one, he was different. The warrior below him raised his blade, the air humming with its sharp edge. He advanced toward Ronan without hesitation, his posture ready for a quick strike. Ronan didn't move. The crowd fell silent. The tension was thick. They all waited for the first move. With a sudden burst of speed, the Zurkai warrior swung his blade. It came down like a lightning strike, aiming to cleave Ronan in half. But Ronan didn't flinch. He ducked low, letting the blade miss by inches. He slid past the warrior's side and jabbed at the warrior's leg with his elbow, a quick strike meant to throw him off balance. The warrior growled, twisting around to face him. Ronan wasn't fighting with brute strength. He was using strategy. Veil Shera noticed this immediately. She had expected Ronan to rely on strength alone, but he was something else, calculating, patient, and relentless. He was not fighting just to survive, but to win. The Zurkai warrior lunged again, his strike fast and furious. But Ronan was already moving. He stepped aside, grabbed the warrior's arm, and used his own momentum to flip him onto the ground. The warrior's armored back hit the stone hard with a crash. The crowd gasped. This human was faster than they expected, and he knew how to use his opponent's strength against him. It was almost like he was thinking 3 steps ahead. The warrior quickly rolled to his feet, shaking off the impact. But Ronan was on him before he could react. He pressed the attack, throwing punches and jabs, aiming for weak points in the armor. The warrior tried to block, but Ronan's movements were too quick, too precise. Finally, with a swift kick to the warrior's midsection, Ronan sent him sprawling. The warrior tried to rise, but his energy was fading. Ronan stood over him, his chest rising and falling with exertion, but his expression remained calm. Veil Shara watched, captivated by the human's composure. She had expected him to break, to show some sign of weakness. But instead, he was controlling the fight. The warrior at his feet was strong, yet Ronan had already outsmarted him. It was clear now, this human wasn't just a brute force fighter. Ronan glanced up at Veil Shara, meeting her gaze. "Is that all you've got, Empress?" The Empress felt a strange sense of respect for the human. He wasn't afraid. He didn't see her or her warriors as a threat. He saw them as challenges. The idea of fear was foreign to him. "Impressive," she said softly, her voice carrying across the arena. "You fight with more than strength, human. You fight with your mind." Ronan shrugged, wiping the sweat from his brow. "It's not about strength. It's about staying alive, and I don't plan on dying today." The Empress narrowed her eyes, intrigued. "You truly believe you can defeat me?" Ronan smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've faced worse." Ronan Dax stood over the defeated Zerkai warrior, his breath steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. The crowd in the arena had fallen silent, their eyes fixed on the human who had, against all odds, defeated their best warrior. Ronan could feel their eyes on him, weighing him, studying him, but he didn't let it affect him. He had been through tougher situations on Earth. This was just another fight. Above, on her throne, Empress Veil Shara remained unmoving, her golden eyes narrowed in deep thought. The human had done something no one had done before. He had not only survived, but he had outsmarted her warrior. Her heart beat with excitement, something she hadn't felt in years. This human was different. There was fire in him, something she couldn't quite place. Ronan wiped the sweat from his forehead, his muscles aching, but he didn't show any signs of fatigue. He had trained for this, had fought in countless battles back on Earth. Surviving was his specialty. "Impressive." Veil Shara's voice echoed down to him. Ronan didn't look up, not yet. He was still watching the fallen warrior, making sure he was truly out of the fight. When he was satisfied, he turned to face the Empress. "You're done with me yet, or is there more?" he asked, his voice calm, almost casual. The Empress tilted her head, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "You've impressed me, human." Her voice carried a certain warmth, but there was no doubt she was still the ruler of this place, still the one in control. "But you have not yet faced your real challenge." Ronan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you talking about?" "I've already faced your best warriors. What else do you have?" Veil Shara stood slowly, her armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the arena. "You misunderstand, human. I'm not speaking of warriors. I'm speaking of myself." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Ronan's eyes narrowed. "You?" he repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You want me to fight you?" The Empress stepped down from her throne with graceful power, her every movement calculated, like a predator preparing for the final strike. The crowd parted as she descended the steps, all eyes on her. Ronan stared at her, sizing her up. She was beautiful, no doubt, with her dark obsidian armor and glowing golden eyes. But beauty meant nothing in the arena. Strength did, and he had already seen that her warriors, though powerful, weren't unbeatable. But this was different. She was the Empress. "Why?" Ronan asked, the curiosity now clear in his voice. "Why fight me yourself?" Veil Shara stopped just a few feet away from him, her gaze never leaving his. "Because," she said softly, her voice low and dangerous, "I need to see if you are truly worthy. You have fought my warriors, but you haven't faced me yet. I need to know if you are the one I've been waiting for." Ronan felt the weight of her words, the intensity in them. There was something about her, something in the way she carried herself, that told him this wasn't just a game. This was her test. He squared his shoulders, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "All right, Empress," he said, his voice steady, confident. "Let's see what you've got." Valshera's lips curled into a smile, but there was no humor in it. Only determination. "Prepare yourself, human." And then, without warning, she struck. Her blade came down so fast Ronan barely had time to react. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly arc of her weapon. He knew this was going to be harder than anything he had faced so far. This wasn't just a battle of strength. This was a battle of will, skill, and endurance. As the two circled each other, Ronan's mind raced. He had to adapt, had to find her weaknesses, but the Empress was no ordinary fighter. Every movement was precise, fluid. Her blade was an extension of her body, as if it were a part of her. He grinned, his blood pumping with the challenge. This was the fight he had been waiting for. Ronan Dax's heart raced as Empress Valshera swung her blade with a fluid, controlled motion. Her weapon seemed to dance through the air, striking with deadly precision, each blow more powerful than the last. Ronan barely had time to react, ducking and sidestepping as she pressed the attack. His instincts kicked in. He had to stay on his toes. This wasn't just about strength. This was a battle of wills. With a swift move, he dodged a downward strike, then spun around to face her. His feet barely touched the ground as he leaped to the side, avoiding another swing that would have cleaved him in half. His chest was already heaving, sweat pouring down his face, but there was no time to rest. The Empress was relentless. Valshera's golden eyes gleamed as she circled him. She was fast, her strikes swift and calculated, never giving him an opening. Every move she made was a test of his ability to survive, to endure. And Ronan knew one thing for sure. He had to be smarter than her, because he couldn't outlast her in sheer strength. Her blade flashed, and Ronan ducked again, this time rolling across the arena floor to gain some distance. He was breathing harder now, his body sore from the previous battles, but there was no way he was going down yet. Not to her. Not now. "You're stronger than I thought, human." Valshera's voice echoed around him, low and dangerous. "But strength alone won't be enough to defeat me." Ronan grinned through the pain. "I'm not just strong. I'm smart." Without warning, he feigned another dodge. But this time, instead of retreating, he lunged forward, aiming for her exposed side. Valshera's eyes widened in surprise, and for a split second, she hesitated, just long enough for Ronan to drive a powerful fist into her abdomen. The impact knocked the wind out of her, but she quickly regained her composure, stepping back with a grace that was almost unnatural. For a moment, she studied him closely, and Ronan could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Respect. But that respect was fleeting, replaced by an intense determination to finish this fight. She raised her blade once more, but this time, something was different. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Ronan narrowed his eyes. He had fought many opponents, but he could sense that this was no ordinary battle. Valshera wasn't just trying to defeat him. She was testing him, measuring his worth. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was a test of his very soul. He swallowed hard, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way to turn the tide. He had faced many tough battles, but this was different. Valshera's voice cut through his thoughts. "You have shown resilience, human. You do not fear me, but that will not save you." She lunged, her blade cutting through the air faster than he could track. Ronan barely blocked the strike, his muscles screaming from the effort. The force of her attack sent him stumbling back, but he caught his balance quickly, refusing to fall. He had to outthink her. That was his only chance. His eyes scanned the arena, searching for anything that could give him an advantage. And then he saw it. A large pillar jutting out from the side of the arena. A thought struck him. If he could use it to his advantage, he might be able to catch her off guard. Without hesitation, Ronan darted toward the pillar, moving fast and with purpose. Veil Shera followed, her blade poised to strike. But just as she swung, Ronan used the pillar to propel himself upward, springing off it and diving straight at her. Veil Shera's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time in the fight, she faltered. Ronan's momentum sent him crashing into her, knocking her to the ground with a force that took her breath away. He didn't waste a second. Pinning her to the stone floor, he held his fist over her chest, ready to strike. For the first time, Veil Shera's calm mask slipped. She was breathing heavily, her golden eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and something else, something almost human. "You?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "You are not like the others." Ronan's heart was pounding in his chest as he looked down at her, his fist still poised to strike. "No," he said quietly, "I'm not like the others." For a moment, the arena was deathly quiet. The crowd held its breath. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Veil Shera raised her hand in surrender. "You've won," she said softly, her voice carrying an unmistakable respect. "You are worthy." Ronan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Slowly, he stood, offering her a hand to help her up. In that moment, he realized that this wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that even against the most powerful beings in the galaxy, humanity could still stand tall. The silence in the arena was deafening. Ronan Dax stood over Empress Veil Shera, his fist still poised to strike. But now, with the weight of her surrender hanging in the air, he found himself hesitating. The fight had been brutal, but it was clear to him now that this wasn't about victory in the traditional sense. It was about proving something much deeper, something that would change everything. He could feel the eyes of the entire arena on him, thousands of beings from across the galaxy, all waiting for the next move. The tension was thick, but Ronan didn't falter. Slowly, he lowered his fist and offered his hand to the Empress, a gesture of respect that was almost unheard of in such a battle. For a long moment, Veil Shera didn't move. She just stared at him, her golden eyes reflecting something unfamiliar. Admiration. There was a flicker of understanding between them, something deeper than the clash of physical strength. This wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about will, honor, and the refusal to back down. Finally, Veil Shera extended her hand, accepting his gesture. As she rose to her feet, she met his gaze. "You've proven yourself human," she said, her voice calm, yet laced with a newfound respect. "More than I expected, I will admit." Ronan nodded, still catching his breath. The fight had taken everything he had, every ounce of energy, every ounce of strategy. But standing here now in front of her, he knew this was just the beginning of something much larger. "It wasn't about winning," Ronan said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "It's about survival and understanding that even the strongest can fall if they don't adapt." Veil Shera studied him, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You are not like the other Terrans," she observed. "Most of your kind would have simply relied on brute force. But you—" She paused. "You think, you fight with purpose. That is why you are different." Ronan smiled slightly, but the smile was hard-earned. He knew she wasn't praising him lightly. This was genuine acknowledgement. "I've fought a lot of battles," he said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But I've learned that strength alone won't win them. It's about knowing when to fight, when to hold back, and when to strike." Veil Shera nodded, her expression shifting. There was something else behind her eyes now, curiosity. "You could be a valuable ally," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Your kind, your resilience, your intellect, it could serve us both. Perhaps we have more in common than I first thought." Ronan raised an eyebrow. This was a turn he hadn't expected. An alliance. Veil Shera didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at the crowd, then back at him. "Your people are strong, human, and I have seen enough to know that Earth's potential goes beyond what even the greatest minds in the galaxy understand. Together, We could accomplish things that would shake the foundation of the galaxy itself. Ronan looked at her, weighing her words carefully. He had been prepared to fight to the death if it came to that. But this was something else entirely. I don't know if we're ready for something like that, Ronan admitted, his voice low but serious. But if you think we can make a difference, then I'm listening. A slight smile tugged at the corners of Veil Shara's lips. Good, she said. We will need to move quickly, but together, we can forge a future that no one in the galaxy has ever imagined. For a moment, the arena seemed to fade away. The crowds, the alien spectators, the other warriors, they all disappeared into the background. All that remained was Ronan and Veil Shara standing together, two unlikely allies in a universe filled with endless possibilities. As the Empress extended her hand once more, this time as an offer of partnership, Ronan took it without hesitation. He wasn't just standing in front of her as a fighter anymore. He was standing as a symbol of what humanity could become, a force to be reckoned with, a power in its own right. Then let's see what we can do, Ronan said, his voice filled with determination. In that moment, the future was uncertain, but for the first time, Ronan truly believed that humanity could hold its own. With Veil Shara by his side, there was no limit to what they could accomplish. As Ronan Dax and Empress Veil Shara began to forge an alliance, tensions within the galaxy reached new heights. Their union was a bold move, one that sent shockwaves through the political systems of multiple star systems. While some saw the potential for peace and progress, others feared the change that Ronan and Veil Shara represented. And soon, those fears would manifest into something darker. Ronan and Veil Shara met often in the weeks following their alliance, strategizing and planning. Their goals were ambitious, creating a coalition that would unite the strongest civilizations across the galaxy, focusing on diplomacy and shared technology. For the first time, humans were seen not as primitive invaders, but as an intelligent and powerful species capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. But their alliance, no matter how powerful, was also under threat. Word of their plans had spread quickly, reaching the ears of those who would rather see the status quo maintained. The Galactic Senate, a body of alien leaders who ruled over the galaxy's most powerful factions, took notice of the growing alliance and the human influence within it. The Senate had been ruling without challenge for centuries, and the idea of humans, especially one like Ronan, challenging their authority was seen as a direct threat. One morning, while Ronan and Veil Shara were discussing their next move, the Senate made its decision. A massive fleet, led by the infamous General Sorak, was dispatched to wipe out their coalition before it could grow any stronger. It was clear, if Ronan and Veil Shara wanted to succeed, they would have to fight. The galaxy wasn't ready for the change they were bringing. As the fleet advanced, Ronan stared at the large holographic map in the strategy room, his mind racing. "They're coming faster than we thought," he said, a note of concern in his voice. "We don't have much time." Veil Shara stood beside him, her posture regal, but there was no hiding the tension in her eyes. "We've known this day would come," she replied, her voice steady but firm. "The Senate won't just sit back and let us dismantle their power." Ronan turned to her, a fire burning in his chest. "Then we fight," he declared. "But not just for survival. We fight for the future we've promised to build." Veil Shara nodded in agreement. She had been a ruler for too long, making decisions based on politics and power. But this battle was different. It wasn't about control. It was about creating a new era. As the two leaders prepared for war, the galaxy braced itself for the conflict that would determine its future. The Senate, with its vast fleets and advanced technology, was a force to be reckoned with. But Ronan and Veil Shara were no ordinary leaders. Together, they were capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. The first battle came quickly. Ronan, now leading a mixed fleet of human and alien ships, watched as the enemy approached. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the battlefield. It wasn't just about firepower. This was going to take precision, quick thinking, and strategy. "We'll hit them hard and fast," Ronan said, his voice calm and collected. "We won't give them a chance to regroup. We have to break their morale." Vel Shera stood beside him, her demeanor commanding. "And we can do more than that," she said. "We know their weaknesses. They rely too much on traditional tactics. We'll exploit that." As the battle began, Ronan's fleet moved swiftly, catching the enemy off guard with hit-and-run tactics, while the larger ships of the Senate's fleet tried to regroup. Ronan and Vel Shera's forces took advantage of their confusion. The fury of the human forces was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Even against overwhelming odds, Ronan's leadership and Vel Shera's strategic genius kept their forces ahead. But the enemy wasn't done. The Galactic Senate had a trick up its sleeve, a super weapon designed to neutralize any fleet in seconds. It was a weapon so powerful that even Ronan's forces had no clear way of countering it. As the weapon powered up, a chilling realization gripped Ronan. If they didn't stop it now, it would be the end of everything they had fought for. "We have one shot at this," Ronan said, his voice sharp with urgency. "If we don't take down that weapon now, it'll be over." Vel Shera's eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no time to hesitate. With a final, decisive move, Ronan ordered a full assault on the weapon's core, and as his fleet charged into the heart of the enemy's lines, he knew they were on the brink of victory, or annihilation. The future of the galaxy would be decided here, in the heat of battle. Ronan Dax's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the Galactic Senate's superweapon power up on his display. The sleek, towering structure, floating high above the battlefield, was designed to tear apart fleets with a single pulse of energy. Ronan knew that if they didn't act now, the battle would be over before it truly began. He had no choice but to risk everything. The tension in the air was suffocating as his fleet moved into position, dodging laser fire from the Senate's ships. Ronan's mind was racing. He had led his forces through countless challenges before, but this was different. This wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about the future of the galaxy itself. He glanced to his side, meeting the eyes of Empress Vel Shera, who had been with him through every step of this war. Her presence was a source of strength, and he knew they could not afford to fail now. "We only have one shot at this," Ronan said, his voice steady but urgent. He turned to face the group of commanders gathered around him. "We take down that weapon now, or we risk everything we'd fought for." Vel Shera stepped forward, her golden eyes gleaming with determination. "Ronan is right," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "We can't let them deploy that weapon. Our entire fleet is depending on us to strike before it's too late." Ronan's fleet, a blend of human ingenuity and alien technology, had proven more capable than anyone had expected. But this, the super weapon, was something they had never seen before. It was a massive energy cannon, capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single blast. The Senate had built it as a show of power, a way to remind the galaxy of their dominance. Now, it was their greatest weapon against the change Ronan and Vel Shera had brought to the galaxy. Ronan didn't hesitate. He gave the order, and his fleet launched into action, darting around the massive warships of the Senate, staying out of range of their deadly weapons. Ronan's ships were fast, nimble, and expertly piloted, but the Senate had strength in numbers. The battle was quickly turning into a race against time. As they got closer to the superweapon's core, the enemy's defenses grew fiercer. Enemy ships surrounded the weapon, trying to prevent any assault on its power source. Ronan's heart skipped a beat as he realized the scale of the task ahead. But he couldn't afford to falter. "Now," he shouted, directing his fleet toward the superweapon's energy core. Vel Shera's fleet followed, matching the precision of Ronan's ships with flawless coordination. "Hold nothing back," she commanded. "This is our moment." Ronan's lead ship, a sleek silver craft, sped through the enemy ranks, weaving between enemy fire and asteroids. He didn't have much time. The superweapon's charging pulse was beginning to glow brighter, signaling the imminent launch. If they didn't disable it now, nothing could stop the Senate's fleet from wiping them out. Ronan's pulse quickened as he finally reached the super weapon's shield. He signaled his fleet to regroup. The shields were thick, reinforced by layers of energy fields, but Ronan had studied the structure of the weapon for days. He knew there was one weak spot, one opening that, if exploited, could tear the whole thing apart. It was their only chance. "Prepare to fire," Ronan ordered. His ship's weapon systems powered up, and with a precise, calculated aim, he fired a series of ion missiles directly at the weak spot. The missiles hit their mark, and a massive explosion rippled through the energy shields, causing a chain reaction. "It's working," Ronan shouted. But the Senate wasn't backing down. They unleashed everything they had left, firing every last weapon at the oncoming ships. Ronan watched as his forces took heavy damage, several ships falling to the onslaught. His heart sank with every explosion, but there was no turning back now. In the chaos, a flash of bright light lit up the battlefield. Ronan's stomach dropped as he realized the weapon had started to detonate. No. He reached for the controls, trying to make one last attempt to stop it. "Ronan," Vale Shera's voice crackled through his comms. "We need to get out of here now." But it was too late. The super weapon's core exploded in a brilliant burst of light, sending shockwaves throughout the entire battlefield. Ronan braced himself for impact, feeling the force of the explosion rattle his ship. But against all odds, his ship held together, and he was alive. When the light faded and the ringing in his ears stopped, Ronan blinked, disoriented. He looked at the battlefield. The super weapon was destroyed, but the Senate's fleet was still a massive threat. Yet, in the distance, a new alliance of ships emerged. Ronan's fleet, Vale Shera's ships, and the alien forces who had joined their cause. The tide had shifted. They had won the first round. Ronan exhaled deeply, the weight of the battle lifting off his shoulders. The battlefield was quiet now, the fiery explosions and thunderous blasts replaced by a silence that seemed almost surreal. Ronan Dax sat in his cockpit, staring out at the remnants of the Senate's fleet, their once proud warships now drifting in space, battered and broken. He felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion wash over him. The super weapon had been destroyed, and the Senate's forces were retreating. They had won. Beside him, Empress Vale Shera flew her ship with a calm, calculated grace. Her fleet had been the backbone of the victory, and the destruction of the superweapon had been the decisive blow. But even as the enemy retreated, Ronan knew that this wasn't truly over. The Senate would regroup, rebuild, and try again. The fight for the galaxy's future was far from finished. "We did it," Ronan said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. He glanced at the flickering hologram in front of him, showing the scattered remnants of the Senate's warships. "But this isn't the end, is it?" Vale Shera's voice came through his comms, steady and firm. "No, it's just the beginning. This victory is ours, but the Senate is far from finished. We need to strike now, before they can recover." Ronan nodded. He knew she was right. The Senate was a powerful force, and they wouldn't just fade away after one defeat. They had to keep pushing, or they risked losing everything they had gained. As they navigated back toward their fleet, Ronan's mind raced. The galaxy was fractured, divided by centuries of conflict. The Senate, once an institution that had ruled with an iron fist, was now weakened, but still dangerous. The galaxy needed change, needed leadership, and Ronan knew it was time to rise to the occasion. His ship docked with the fleet, and Ronan stepped out, meeting Vale Shera on the command deck. She stood tall, her silver armor gleaming, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "What's next?" Ronan asked, his voice low but filled with resolve. Vale Shera looked out over the vast expanse of space, where the remnants of the Senate's fleet were still floating like wreckage after a storm. "Next, we rebuild. We offer the galaxy a choice, unity or chaos. We give the people the power to shape their own future." Ronan nodded. We'll need allies. There are still many factions out there, and the Senate has supporters. We can't do this alone. Val-Shara turned to him, her eyes gleaming with a mix of resolve and optimism. We have the support of those who fought alongside us, and the galaxy, in its broken state, is ready for change. We will find our allies, and we will unite the galaxy under a new banner. The weight of their task was heavy, but for the first time in a long while, Ronan felt a spark of hope. They had destroyed the Senate's superweapon, crippled their military, and struck a blow to their power. The time for change had come. As Ronan and Val-Shara stood together, watching the stars beyond them, they both knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same, but that was exactly what they had fought for. The war is over, but the future is ours to shape, Ronan said, his voice steady. And we will shape it together. Val-Shara smiled, her expression fierce and unwavering. Together. With that, Ronan and Val-Shara turned to face the horizon of possibilities that lay ahead. They knew there would be more battles, more challenges, but they were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future, for the galaxy, and for the people who had placed their trust in them. And this time, they would not fail.